Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Kevin L. Jackson with you here on Veteran Voices. Welcome to today's show. Kevin, special guest
Hey,
co-host. How you doing, sir?
hey, man. This is one of the topics I really love doing with you. This veteran voices. Thank you very much for having on board.
Absolutely. It reminds me, we still got to do a deep dive into your time with the U.S. Navy.
Oh, you don't want
And
to bore people with that. I mean, I'd make you look too bad. I mean, I'm sorry, but the Navy has the best pilots. We land on aircraft
oh man,
carriers. We fly in space. I mean, we do all the good stuff, man. You Air Force. Well, never mind.
well, I'm so pleased that the Air Force we've got two representatives, myself and one of our special guests, are strongly representing the U.S. Air Force here today. We've got the Army representing, of course, U.S. Navy, but we also, most importantly, have got two outstanding guests that we're going to be talking to and diving into a lot of cool things they're doing to serve the veteran community and just doing good stuff, big things across the business landscape. So let's do this. Quick programming note, Kevin, before we get started here today. So
Mhm.
this program is part of the Supply Chain Now family of programming, proudly presented, serving our veteran community. You can find Veteran Voices wherever you get your podcast from. Subscribe for free. As we like to say, money back guarantee if you don't like any of the shows. But our show is also conducted in partnership with our friends over at vets2industry.com. They're a nonprofit that are doing wonderful things for our veteran community. In fact, we got to get everyone here connected to Vets2 Industry. You can learn more about Brian Arrington and the whole team over there at V2I at vets, the numeral 2industry.com. Okay, Kevin, you ready to get going?
Yeah, let's get going, man. This is great.
All right, let's bring in our two featured guests here today. Jermaine Cohen, managing partner and co-founder at Project VET. Jermaine, how you doing?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Already have enjoyed the conversation so far. We should have been recording a pre-show session, but you brought with you your partner, Rod Lee, partner and co-founder at Project VET. How you doing, Rod?
Doing well. Thank you, sir. Appreciate y'all having us on.
You bet. And Rod, who we were talking earlier, is a fellow Air Force veteran. Jermaine is an Army veteran. And of course, Kevin is our naval aviator with the U.S. Navy. So, all right. So let's start with you, Jermaine. Up front, we want to talk about some fun stuff, right? Where you grew up, like some memories of those formative years. So where are you from and tell us about it.
Born and raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up a family of three, really. Played a lot of sports growing up, baseball, was in a band. Didn't do a whole lot. I wasn't really a pretty mild-mannered kid. I didn't do a whole lot. But one day I came home from baseball practice, my senior year in high school, and there was an Army recruiter at my house.
So the wool was dyed. I mean, it was already dyed the wool at that point.
Stalking you early.
Real early. That was pretty much all she wrote after that. I signed up shortly after. I was gone. Right
So, sports in high school. What was baseball your strongest sport?
Baseball was my thing. I was probably better at football, considering I actually walked on to play football at Texas State when I was years older, like when I was 25. Right.
Wow.
But I didn't play football.
Impressive.
My friends didn't play football. My friends were in the marching band.
Oh, yeah.
So
With all the girls, right?
yeah, absolutely. Band camp, band trips.
So one other question. So sports aside, and it sounds like you were a music lover. What else? And by the way, I was born and raised essentially in Aiken, South Carolina. So just up the road or down the road from the upstate there. What else were you passionate about, in your earlier years?
In my earlier years, I was really passionate about music and definitely spending time with my family. We did a lot of stuff together. Like I had a large extended family growing up, and that was back in the days where people grew up and they didn't move away. Right. So I knew all my cousins, and now as an adult, I don't know any of them anymore. I enjoyed those days as a kid.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Family is everything, man.
That's right. I had some big reunions as a kid and loved the big football games and everything else we did. So I'm with you. All right. So Rod, let's talk about your upbringing a bit. We learned just a moment ago before we went live that you're from Texas. So tell us about where you were born and raised and some of the things that you love to do as a kid.
So it's pretty much the same story as Jermaine, except Texas is football, so we lived a little different. I was born in West Texas, Midland to be exact. So Friday Night Lights was my real life. I knew some of those guys growing up. Moved to Fort Worth, which is where I live now. Most of my dad's family is here to this day. I live right down the street from my grandparents. My grandmother now lives right down the street from me. So family is everything. But for the most part, grew up playing sports. Both of my parents are college athletes. That's how they met. My birth kind of stopped my mother's college career short. But,
she blames you for that, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably a little bit. But now it's really been a focus on helping the community, and a lot of that comes from my mother. She is a newly elected constable in a precinct out here, so she's all about giving back to the community. That's kind of what she's preached my whole life. I joined the military because of my uncle, her youngest brother. He and his wife are retired Army. So my first interaction with a recruiter was taking the ASVAB for the Army. I wanted to become a tank mechanic. My uncle told me, "You're too smart for that. Go to the Air Force." So that's kind of what led me to the Air Force. I actually then went back, talked to the Navy first, because I was really interested in. I couldn't swim. I didn't grow up swimming. My dad was a lifeguard, but I didn't grow up swimming. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get in the Navy, work myself out. My uncle was like Air Force.
I had some horrible memories swimming in the Navy.
Can't say he steered me wrong, to tell you the truth. No, hot bunking it doesn't sound too. So, I am glad with my choice, and I thank him for that. So.
I was one of many aqua rocks in the Navy.
So, all right. So Jermaine, I want to circle right back because one final question before I pass the baton to Kevin here. You spoke to maybe the cause of what got you in the Army was that recruiter in your house at an early age. But what was your why? What made you ultimately sign the dotted line and join?
So there was several things going on. So my oldest brother, rest in peace, he was a Marine. I always looked up to him. Don't ask me why I didn't go into the Marine Corps. The time he was in Japan, I couldn't talk to him. But I wanted that autonomy. Like I knew that my parents didn't have a whole lot of money. My dad had a stroke my senior year in high school. So, things were going downhill. My sister was in college, and it was kind of that was my step into manhood, right? I could go out and take care of myself, and I didn't have to depend on my parents so much. So that's really what it all came down to. And I have to add this, they offered me money, and they told me they'd pay for my college. And that was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that. And what was your brother's name?
Lee Cohen.
Lee Cohen. All right. Rest in peace. Hate to hear that. So, but thanks for sharing to you both. All right. So Kevin, on a much lighter note, where are we going next?
Well, actually, I was very interested about what you did while you were in the military, your branch or your MOS. Rodney, what did you do? You didn't want to do tanks, so what did you become? Ordnance man? What?
So oddly enough, it was shortly after I took the ASVAB. I actually got into a private school, college, Fort Worth. So I kind of delayed that for a bit, but I had friends that were joining the Air Force, just as my uncle had told me. One of them became an avionics technician. He was like, I love it. We get to work on the aircraft without being on the flight line. It takes a lot of high technical expertise. I've always been a technical guy. So that kind of led me down that road. I like to put together computers when I was younger, take things apart, put them back together. So that's exactly what I went to do. I went to become an aeronautics engineer. Most people call it a technician,
Right.
but because I was on the F-15 and F-16 side. And then from there, after doing that for about 8 years, they were phasing out our job at Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida. So I had a decision, what could I go and do? I really wanted to go to Germany. My job just wasn't going there. So I decided to become an education and training manager.
Mm-hmm.
I had just got my bachelor's degree from Embry-Riddle. So I was like, well, let's try this out, see if I can go get deployed overseas, I'd been to Japan, wanted to go to Germany or back to Japan. So that was kind of my thought. And then they sent me up the road from Florida to Georgia. I got stuck there for a couple years doing the same thing. And then so I left active duty and became a guardsman here in Fort Worth and did training again for another 2 years.
Oh, that's so you went through quite a few changes there. How about you, Jermaine? Did you how did you pound that ground?
So it's funny you ask because initially I just wanted to do 2 years and get out. The easiest way to do that is obviously 11 bang bang, right? 11 Bravo, 11 Charlie, Mortars, like that. And I talked to my best friend, his dad was a jump master in the Army.
Oh, okay.
He told me, he said, hey, he's like, I don't want to convince you to do anything you want to do. He was like, just kind of, he said, think about what you can do when you get out. And he said, he told me the longer the training, the more technical it is, the more you'll learn, and the more valuable it is when you get out. So
oh yeah,
I chose this job, and I remember the recruiter, he was like, I said, well, what is this? And he couldn't explain it to me. But it was 28 weeks of training, which is about 8 or 9 months. And it was a radio commsec repairman.
Oh,
well,
okay.
I went to the 4th Infantry Division, and it was Force 21. We had all the new equipment for the Army. So I couldn't work on any radios. So or anything, any commsec, nothing, because it was all under contract. Defense suppliers. So I ended up becoming almost like a SME in my unit. And I learned how to use the FPC-2 and MTS, and I started training people. And that was what I did. And when we got deployed, they forgot to mention that, they forgot to mention all the convoys and stuff during the first tour that we would go on. But it was a great experience. I learned a lot while I was there. We lost one guy, rest in peace, Nathaniel Caldwell. Always mention his name. He was the first guy to die on Camp Caldwell. They named the base after him. So, but yeah, that was it. I did. It's considered ordnance, but a lot of people will say signal.
So I mean, sometimes, like I know there are quite a few lessons I learned in the military from people that I followed, my commanders, my leaders. What steps out in your mind? Were any leaders or people that really made you who you are?
Me or Rodney? Sorry.
You.
Oh yeah.
I'll go back to Rodney in a second.
Absolutely. So Andre Canny.
Okay.
Yeah, he Sergeant First Class Canny. He was my NCOIC in the Army, and I actually ended up working for him as a contractor afterwards. But he's probably the best leader I've ever had in my life. He was representative of all the values that the Army held to a high standard.
Right.
And it wasn't an act. It was just who he was. He was fair, like he did the right thing, and he worked like no other. And so getting out of the Army and being in, working for him is where I learned everything I can learn about, just even being a man. I was a 19-year-old kid.
Right.
When I first got there, he said, Jermaine, Private Cohen, most of these guys, they're not going to go to school or do whatever. He directed me in the right direction.
He molded you, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely. Great guy. Great guy.
So who made you, Rodney?
Well, that would be Kevin and Sandra Lee, but who made me in the military? I'd probably say from an early, like I said, my first duty station was Okinawa, Japan.
Mhm.
So when I got in there, we were in the height of OIF and OEF.
So when Naha spent some time there.
Yeah, it was kind of, it was a culture shock for me. Like Jermaine, I had a long tech school, and that tech school was spent in Texas. So I went from basic training in San Antonio. They drove me across the street to go to my first tech school. They drove me, or I drove myself up 7 hours to Wichita Falls. So I was never far away from home, right?
Right.
And then so they shipped me over to Japan. That's my first time being away. And so, Robert Sumlin, he was one of my chiefs there. Colonel Land. I've got a lot of colonels that I could name that kind of, because I worked close with a lot of the squadrons.
Right.
I was kind of one of the young NCOs that people came to for information, and they just helped me understand, what I was doing it for, and why you should always give 110%. I never really, and Jermaine can attest to this. If somebody asks me to get stuff done, it's going to get done, and it's due to them.
Oh,
Yeah.
You never had to ask them twice; they were gonna knock it out of the park, and that's why I really liked working for those guys. And also Derek Lewis, he was at my last duty station, and more than anything, he taught me how to live outside of the military. So I was in Georgia by myself for the first year, waiting for my family to come up, and I spent a lot of time just kind of following him. He was a outside of the military. He coached his son in football, and I watched his interaction with his kids. He was, top-notch guy on and off base.
Right.
And now his son is playing at Texas Tech. So it's great to see somebody put that much work and effort into their children and watching them grow as well as in their professional career. So those are guys
Well, you're working with F-15 Eagles. I mean, that's an awesome airframe. So that in and of itself could be, I could see as a great accomplishment. I mean, the F-15 is the only plane that actually shot down a satellite with a missile, right? So what are your accomplishments that you're really proud of?
So while I was in Tyndall, which Tyndall is a training base, so most of the F-15 pilots, well, all of the F-15 pilots come through Tyndall to get their certification.
I went to training in Pensacola, right down the street.
Right, and I actually graduated out of that Naval Air Station, so it's a cool place. And so I did actually go back and forth between those two locations, and I learned a lot about how different bases operate. So you have your operational base down the street in Eglin, and your training base at Tyndall. So my biggest accomplishment, I would say, I got Technician of the Year for our MAGCOM. And that was due to a lot of work between bases. So we're having a lot of fails on a specific radar receiver. I was learning a lot from a lot of different people on how to properly troubleshoot and maintain aircraft. And I think had it not been for that interaction between multiple sites, multiple bases, understanding crosstalk and how you can come together and solve a problem as a group, I think that's helped me now in my career and in Project VET, depending on partners, depending on outside resources, and not putting everything on yourself, allowing others to have accountability in things that you do.
Right.
So
That's really important. That's really important in life. And I think we want to talk about your transition. But before we do that, Jermaine, what was your biggest accomplishment? I mean, Force 21, when I was in the military, that was really driving a lot of decisions at the higher level. So, what are you really proud of while you were in the military?
So I guess to that point of Force 21 is that whole integration process. I was a pretty big part in my unit of it, training a lot with my warrant officer and learning how to use the FCB2 and MTS and helping train the units. I mean, our shop supported the entire brigade, which, 110 Cav. I mean, it's a lot of Bradley's, tanks. And so to me, that was a big accomplishment. We did a lot with our small little teams. So I'm actually very proud of that work that we did while we were downrange.
Well, yeah, leading the military into this advanced technology that we just take for granted today. I remember that.
Agreed. All right. So I'm a huge, I don't know if y'all are, but I'm a huge military aircraft nerd. And when you mentioned F-15, Kevin, a gorgeous aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
I was at Shaw Air Force Base, where we had 3 F-16 squadrons and 1 A-10 squadron back in the day, my first stint. And I'll never forget demos. If y'all remember demos, when they fly over the flight line. And Shaw was a pretty small base. I mean, it was, when you're eating at the chow hall, you weren't far from the ramp and all. And man, I remember in my car eating my sandwich from that styrofoam box, listening to sports radio or something, and the pilot would kick in, Kevin, whatever y'all do as pilots, and it'd be a huge boom and a roar.
Yeah.
And it's tough to even describe to people that haven't heard just the fury of military power. And
going to afterburner. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And they're if I understand it correctly, they're remanufacturing new F-15 platforms, I believe, Kevin. But gorgeous aircraft. All right, so let's talk about transition. I appreciate what y'all have shared already. It's always tough to do these conversations justice in an hour or so, but let's talk about transition, because we're going to talk about Project VET in a minute and great things you are doing across the veteran community there. But transition, we get a ton of questions, and we talked about pre-show. When I got out in 2002 and really since, as I've interacted with well, I mean, heck, I couldn't find a job, right? And I wasn't a combat veteran. I didn't have some of those challenges. I had a 4-year degree, broad, much like you, but I was enlisted, and I had a strong, friends and family network. I didn't know how to get a job, but that's okay. That's on a long list of things I didn't know back then. But I couldn't find, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to use recruiters, had no professional network. And really, a lot of those elements have been very commonplace in the thousands of conversations we've had with veterans since. So I want to talk to y'all about your transition first, and then also want y'all both to give some advice to our listeners for their own transition, whether they're about to get out, already out, or if they're kind of entering the professional space and want to figure out how to move up. So, Jermaine, let's start with you. Let's talk about your transition out of the Army, and then we'll circle back on best practices.
Absolutely. And so I got out in 2004 when I came back from Iraq in November of 2004. And, it was, when you're young, it's probably 22, 23, you really just ready to go, right? ACAP, stamp my book so I can get out of here. I don't hit the door running. And there are likely resources that either are there or you don't know about, or you don't really care about at that age. And I'm sure I passed up a lot, but I kind of just started carving out my own path. I got a job very quickly as a security guard at Fort Hood. And I started continuing my education. That was the main thing for me, because I wanted the degree, I wanted to be a teacher and all this other stuff. But there wasn't a lot of direction. Right. I know I mentioned before that I worked for my NCOIC. I actually ended up going to Kuwait to work as a contractor. And I guess to clear up what I said earlier, when I said that he said these other guys, well, what he meant was that I volunteered to go back to school is what I was trying to say.
Gotcha.
I volunteered because it was free, tuition assistance. And they told me, they would let me go, leave work a little bit early to take the classes. But I went and worked overseas for a while. And then I came back and went back to college, Texas State. That was kind of the path. But it wasn't, I still was kind of in limbo all these years. I didn't really know what I wanted to do or how to do. I was kind of just wondering. Like I went to college for something that I didn't really want to do. I don't use that degree to this day. It wasn't until 2017 when I went back to school at UT, the same program that Ronnie was in at MSTC at Cohen. That's when I realized, like, hey, like this is more in line with what I want to do. I have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I want to be that person. I'm sorry, Kevin, were you about to?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to be involved in that world. I didn't know exactly where I fit in, but it's kind of how all of this came about. It's, you know, Rodney and I, we became friends in 2014, working for an aviation company, and you know, we just kind of grew from there. And then here we are today. We founded Project VET together.
I love that. There's so many elements of that. You know, so many folks, I think, never find that passion in their life, right? And they just they clock in and clock out every day. They don't maybe know any better, right? And so I love
your passion is your life. If you don't find it, you just get lost.
Hey, amen. So
Absolutely.
Jermaine, I love that. One more follow-up before I move over to Rod. Do you think, so what I picked up, you know, I got out, as I mentioned, in 02, so it's been a long time. And as I talked with people that got out when I got out, and then of course, all the points in between, and then here recently, it seems like the services in general have gotten a lot better about how they prep, you know, airmen and seamen and soldiers getting, Marines getting out. But did you get a mix of good prep and not so good prep as you were getting out of the Army?
Back then, Scott, you know, I remember seeing the transition in CO, and you know, if you're not staying in, and this is not throwing anybody under, but if you're not staying in, they're kind of just like, okay, he's getting out. There's no point in doing anything for this guy anymore. And that's kind of how, you know, that's kind of how it felt. It may not have actually been that way, but it was like, all right, this guy's getting out. Okay, let him go.
Yeah.
So, but there wasn't a whole lot of resources.
Yeah. And so that was 04. That's right. So I'm thinking, I was thinking when 2017, as you founded the company, which we'll touch on in a second, but, well, the good news there is it seems like, at least my Air Force buddies I speak to, it seems like they've gotten a lot better, whether you're staying in or you're transitioning out and separating, that they've, you know, they're preparing folks better for the gap we all have as we're serving and trying to tackle the private sector. All right. So Rod, let's move over to you. Let's talk about your transition. I'm going to circle back to both of y'all about advice. As you share your transition stories, our listeners are going to probably pick up advice regardless, but we're going to circle back and get y'all really spell it out. So Rod, tell us about your transition.
Well, so as I mentioned, I left the active duty Air Force to go to then it was reserves. And I was kind of already thinking full-time reserves. So I was transitioning to Texas. My original plan was to go to Arizona, become a reservist there. That didn't pan out. Then I went to Houston, was going to work at the Resiliency Wing. So that's what I did my last 2 years in the Air Force. I actually worked with J-Stars, E8 Wing, Surveillance Wing, awesome guys out there. And I really wanted to stay in that operations field. They told me that I was non-deployable, so I couldn't be with the reservist wing, but the resiliency wing, sorry. So the reserves didn't take me, but the Air National Guard did. But I was going to have to be a traditional guardsman. So I went from thinking I'm still going to be a full-time airman to, you know, what do I do now? I had just tried to get commission. As I stated, I was trying to get overseas, but that wasn't working. I just literally graduated with an MBA in January of that year. So it was May timeframe. And I was like, well, you know, I got my MBA because I wanted to have my own business. I had been tinkering around with some things. They didn't really pan out, but now being a traditional guardsman, that was kind of what I needed to focus on. I kept running into hurdles. As Jermaine mentioned, I started working with this aviation company. Jermaine and I kind of clicked. That was my first trip to Canada. We shared some time up there, and yeah, where did we go?
Montreal.
Oh, Montreal.
Absolutely.
Beautiful city.
Saw the Roxbury. It was a great great trip. So he and I just kind of stayed in contact. I went to a couple different aviation companies, and then I actually started working for a aviation software company out of Canada. So then I was going to Canada every other week. There, I kind of learned how to run a business, being a product manager. So from start to finish, you kind of own this vision. And what I was doing was trying to figure out the best way to keep maintenance going within different sectors of the globe. So I worked with Saab out of Sweden. I worked with BAE out of the UK. I was working with the Canadian Air Force. And I was trying to figure out the best way for them to transition from, a local maintenance program into a global maintenance program. And that got my gears thinking about, okay, if I can build this thing, create something, and make sure that these different entities are able to use it, why can't I do that with my own thing, right? So that's where Jermaine and I, we started talking. I end up going to MSTC, as he mentioned, which is a technological commercialization. They teach you how to become an entrepreneur. And that's really when things started clicking. Jermaine went the next year. I graduated in 17. He graduated in 18. And then we kept trying to figure out ways to become business partners. And, last year it finally clicked. Things that we love to do, help veterans and the communities that we are a part of. So
love it.
You figure out how to deal with change. That's what's important.
Resiliency all day. Yeah.
So, and we're going to talk about Project VET here in a second. I want to circle back one more time. If you had one or two things to share with veterans, again, whether they're about to get out, and if you're doing what I did, you wait till you're already out to start looking for a job. That was one of my mistakes. Or if they're out, they're in transition already, or if they're in industry, maybe get into their first job and trying to figure out how to advance and make connections and build a network and whatnot. So what's one or two pieces of advice, Jermaine, that you'd offer those folks?
First is USO Pathfinder program.
Oh.
This is, I actually had a call with them this week because I was inspired by them. Because what they do is essentially they assign you a scout, and the scout actually puts together somewhat of I won't say a roadmap, but to suit it to your needs of what you want to do. And they have the connections to do it within your region. So whether it's education, employment, all types of, there's so many different resources out there. But the problem is well, it's not, I won't say it's a problem, but everyone can't market all their services on national media. Right. But as I'm going through these companies, they're just connecting me with more and more people that are doing all these things, and they're all free resources for veterans, but people just don't know about it. So, reach out to the USO Pathfinder program. I think that's a good start, right? And that'll actually spiderweb out to a lot of other resources that actually get them to a place where they.
Wonderful. USO Pathfinder. We'll see if we can't find a link and put that in the show notes. Appreciate you sharing that. And
Absolutely.
By the way, a little plug for our nonprofit partner. They do similar things. So Vets to Industry, they'll vet. There's a plethora of real resources, and then some not so real resources out there that tout their service to veterans, and they do a good job of vetting that, and then adding or kind of maintaining a library of resources of those folks they vetted at vets2industry.com. So it sounds like USO Pathfinders is similar. And of course, everyone knows USO, right? I love those folks. All right. So Rod, let's talk about what's that one or two key pieces of advice that you'd offer the same folks?
I would say what both of you kind of mentioned, building that network, knowing what resources are out there, probably 3 to 4 months before you get out, give yourself some, runway so that you can hit the ground running, literally, because that's probably what you'll be doing, running from interview to interview, trying to figure out what it is that you want to do and who you want to do it with.
Yeah.
So I think building that network, going on LinkedIn, making sure you have the right connections, making sure you're a part of the right communities, doing outreach to your veterans commission. So whatever local veterans commission you can reach out to, I'd advise doing that, as well as Department of Labor and things of that nature. Understanding how to articulate what it is that you did while you were in the military and convert that into civilian terms. I think that's another key piece.
Love
Yeah,
that.
you mentioned network, something that when you're in the military, you don't realize how powerful a network is and how much you really need it when you leave the military. And you got to think about that before you leave, things like LinkedIn and stuff. So, people that you meet in the military become your business network when you leave. So you just got to build and maintain that network.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And I believe, Kevin, LinkedIn has made it free, at least for a year, I believe, for veterans to
Yeah.
use the enhanced product, which was a nice move by, I guess, the folks over at Microsoft. So, but when, Kevin, so before we move on to Project Vet, which I'm looking forward to hearing about, what's one other key thing that maybe we didn't hear yet that folks transitioning should keep on the radar, Kevin?
Well, actually, the fact that everything is constantly changing, and you have to leverage these technologies, these communications technologies, like social media. People say social media is just something to play with, but really it's a communications technology. And over the past year with the pandemic, I guess, online communication. We were just talking before about, one, you're using Zoom, then you're using WebEx, then you're using Teams, then you have to know how to present yourself and communicate electronically. So, having a camera and being able to deal with these collaboration technologies and having a good microphone and headset, all of that is really part of business life today. And when you're in the military, you may not recognize that. And that's a critical learning skill for business today. So, as part of your transition, learn how to use these tools, be proficient with them.
Excellent points there. And I would just add one more that we've mentioned before. I've really enjoyed, of course, the supply chain space, right? Beyond a military aircraft nerd, I'm a big supply chain nerd too. And there's a lot of associations, professional associations that serve that space. And many of them offer free or highly discounted memberships to veterans. And that's a great way, especially if you start, a year out. And if you're getting out, or know you're retiring or separating, a year out, kind of work backwards, identify what you want to do, find the influential associations that serve that space, and then and first see if they offer discounts for veterans and military members. But then you get in their network and add those members to your network and piece together kind of how they made it to where they are. Yeah. I wish I'd done that looking back, but hey, hindsight's 2020. All right, so now we're going to get to the cleanup hitter portion of today's podcast. I've really enjoyed learning from Kevin and tracking you on social, the great things that you are doing at Project Vet. I just saw earlier on LinkedIn, and this will. I'm not even listening to my own advice. I'm dating this stuff, guys.
I was thinking the same thing.
Y'all have got a culmination of a wonderful tournament that's going to already have taken place by the time this publishes. But let's start with you, Jermaine. Tell us about Project Vet, and let's start with why y'all founded the organization first.
So it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier in the conversation. When I got out of the military, there wasn't a lot of guidance or direction, or at least I didn't know where to find it. And that was kind of, it was really pre-social media days too. So it wasn't like, I could pull out my smartphone and be on Facebook or whatever. Right. It was just wherever I could get information. And so, kind of just thinking about all of that and where me and Rodney were in our lives. I turned 40 this year. And and I know that I'm turning 40. I spent all these years working in these jobs that I really, like, I could have done without, right? Like, if I really get down to the meat and potatoes, I probably shouldn't have worked at a lot of places I worked at, but you know, someone's got to pay the light bill. And so we started kind of brainstorming, and we met Kevin along that process. I've dealt with mental illness for the majority, all of my adult life, but even my childhood, right? There's, you know, it's a lot of it goes hand in hand, and you know, finding resources for that has always been frowned upon, especially when you're, you know, in the military. You know, we got that. Now we're the commo guys, like, oh, this guy, like, what did you do? You know, there's all these things and stigmas, and you kind of just shy away. You don't go get help, and what happens is years later, you know, when you're alone or single man or whatever, you can take off for a weekend and get your mind right. I can drive as far as I want to, no responsibility. But when you have a family, that no longer works anymore. And what happens is, you know, you don't want that to bleed over to your children, your spouse, and your wife. And so Project VET, to me, like, that was a big part of it. It's like, hey, we need to figure out, you know, a way to connect these veterans, have these communities, because especially now during this pandemic, where everyone's at home all the time, especially guys who are alone, you know, domestic violence rates are going up. There's so many things that are happening. It's like, how do we provide a platform to where we can bring more people together as a community? And we started brainstorming these different initiatives. Kevin, you know, he reached out. It's like, hey, what about, you know, gaming? And I had done some research from Johns Hopkins. They did some research on the effects of mental health in gaming, right? On how, for veterans, these things did act as a community. You could go play with your friends, and it's just talking, camaraderie. Because when you're a veteran, the thing that I miss the most is the camaraderie. It's like my battle buddy, the guys that I live with.
It's that network,
Absolutely. And so we wanted to be involved with that. We want to be the guys who help guys transitioning. We wanted to have these resources and initiatives to kind of be that type of platform. And that's what we're doing. So, and I don't want to run over Rodney's time or anything like that, but I just wanted to outline a few of the initiatives that we're working on now to kind of give you guys an idea. And so the video games for vets, that is ongoing online gaming tournament. It's done through an app that a company we partnered with called Award Pool. The guys can go in and register at any time and play, and they can collect points and convert those into tokens through our platform. The beauty of all of this is the tournament that we're running, we're actually going to issue the prize money in USD coin. So we pride ourselves on being forward thinking with technology as well, because, you know, technology commercialization, like, that's what we did. Like, we want to be out in the front of things when it comes to technology. So there's so many things we have going on. I think we're in a good position there. We partnered with another company that actually does emotional support animals, which are these beagle dogs we have. And, you know, if anyone of you guys know anyone who has a service dog animal, you know, that takes an average of 3 years mostly to get a service dog.
Wow.
3
years on a waiting list to get a
absolutely.
Man.
And, you know, we can do it. These emotional support animals, and these dogs are heroes because they save other dogs. They're beagle dogs. They freeze their blood platelets, and these dogs save dogs around the world. But when they reach their capacity, you know, they have to retire them, and they need homes. And who better than, you know, some veterans out there who may want a pet or a companion, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that aspect right there. We also help with VA claims through one of our partners as well. And lastly, I'll just end with this. I don't want to run over on time, but our our main cornerstone is being able to provide a platform that allows transitioning veterans to learn how to start a business, to learn what it's like to work, in a startup. Where I mentioned before the USO Pathfinder program, that had a lot of the inspiration into what me and Rodney started brainstorming about, because our background with University of Texas, MSTC, has everything to do with that. And we know that people who are getting out, a lot of people want to work for themselves, but they don't really know how. Like I didn't know how. Like, I messed up so many things. Right. Even now with Rodney's my.
We all did, right? We all do. Still do.
Rodney's my rock. Like I mess up so much stuff, but he's just on top of it. But we're learning as we go, and so yeah, that's in a nutshell. We're a company out here. We're trying to help as many veterans as we can, whether it's transitioning out of the military, whether it's mental health. Some of the partners like the Warriors Resource Institute, the Cohen Veterans Network, we partner with all those guys to be resources for those veterans. And that's how we want to grow.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to highlight in case the audience missed, you said that people could get on and play online games, yes, and get real money. You said tokens, but that's
all right.
Money.
All right. So let me be clear. So it's not real money. So the prize money is real because the USD coin.
That's what I'm talking about.
The prize money is real. USD coin is backed by the US dollar. That's a stable coin. However, through the Project VET store, we have our own tokens, Project VET coin, which can be converted from points from playing the video games to, win or buy or redeem, some of our merch from our store, like hoodies, shirts, T-shirts, things of that nature.
So that really can support you and help you grow and help you partner and support the vets in transitions because, you need to get those gamers. They get addicted. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for a good cause.
Absolutely.
Well, and I've seen some studies. I wish I had them here right on my fingertips here, but I've seen studies where that sense of community and connection and connectivity that, some folks get it by going to a local coffee shop during normal times, of course. Some folks get it by going to church. Some folks get it in the video game community, right? And we're all different strokes for different folks. Some folks get it through all those and then some. Before I get you to weigh in on some what Jermaine has shared and Kevin has shared about Project VET, I think it's really important that, Jermaine, what you said earlier, about halfway through about mental health. Mental health is not a bad word. It should not be stigmatized. We all have mental health, whether we want to embrace it or not. And to your point, Jermaine, I think one of the challenges that at least I've seen, not throwing stones or anything, but we don't want to admit when something is just not right. And unfortunately leads to a lot of folks not getting some of the help they need, whether it's some small issues or challenges or mental health things that, they want to address or that they need to address, or some of the bigger challenges. So I think that's really an important message folks should pick up on and embrace. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah. And I think it's really important also because the military as a culture teaches people to be strong and not to ask for help. And if you, have a mental health or you need help with that, people won't ask. And it gets even harder if you're leaving the military and you're transitioning, because now you feel that you've somehow let yourself down if you go ask for help. So Project VET is really filling a critical role. These are people that know the military culture, know what it means to transition, and you can really help someone understand that, if you need help, get help and don't be afraid to ask.
Love that.
Absolutely.
Love that, Kevin. Great point. All right. So Rod, let's, based on what you heard, I really appreciate Jermaine's point, kind of the story of y'all's founding and connecting and then founding, and then the point by point, some of the program and initiatives you are driving. What else would you add to the Project Vet discussion?
Well, I want to go back and talk about something Kevin just mentioned. Um, Throughout my time in the military, I had a good 10 years, I would say, where things were kind of sporadic. You move around a lot. And I think that's also what kind of got me in the entrepreneurial mindset, is that I can't stay in one job doing something for, a very long time, because the military always has you moving, whether you keep the same job or not, you're kind of always transitioning. And so that's what my continuous career was just a continuous transition. In 2012, the U.S. Air Force started something for the first term airmen's course, which we call it FTAC,
Right.
which was called Resiliency Training. And this was based on, recognizing mental health, especially for those new airmen that were coming to base, being away from family for the first time, trying to figure out how to maneuver, whether you're a young airman or you're a young lieutenant. I think it's a culture shock, right? It's something new, and the military does tend to, I don't want to say sweep it under the rug, but not pay as much attention to it, and they kind of leave it on you. And that's something that I wanted to bring to Project Vet, not putting it on that person and not having them deal with their mental health alone, but bringing that community together where we could have discussions, even something like we're doing right now on the Zoom call, talking about our military careers, just sharing stories, positive or negative. It's something that we can connect on, and it's something that, makes you feel like I'm okay. These guys, they experienced the same thing I did. I'm okay. So that's one of the best things I think we've done so far, is this tournament and focusing on mental health, connecting with the Cohen Veterans Network. Something else we have big that was supposed to start this year, but it'll start next season, is we've actually partnered with the NBA G League team out of Dallas. So they're
Nice.
the Texas Legends, and what they're going to do for us is they're going to allow 100 veterans and their families come with them to games. So they'll have free seats at home games, just showing support for veterans' mental health and otherwise. So that was another big initiative that we wanted to, hit the ground running with, was letting the local community show support to veterans and keep those things moving throughout the year, and not just focusing on what mental health month or things of that nature, because it's continuous, right? We talk about the 22 veterans that commit suicide a day.
Numbers up.
It's the numbers up, especially during this pandemic. And I've worked from home for about 6 years now. And sometimes I can get stir crazy. I traveled a lot when I was doing the thing with the Canadians. They had me all over Europe in the coldest months of the year. Then I got to come back to Texas and sweat it off in the summer. But being on the road all the time and not being able to see family, that did wear on me. So I may not have got the PTSD from being out in the desert. My deployments were actually pretty fun for the most part. So not to brag, but that's another Air Force perk. So coming back was still hard to be away from family, but we weren't doing it long term as some of our other brothers and sisters in arms were doing. So most of mine was just the travel and everything wearing down on me. And I went to a lot of folks for support. I have a great support system with a lot of veterans, whether I met them at UT, and that's the tower that you see behind me. I met a lot of great veterans through that program, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. And a lot of them were still trying to figure out their next moves. And that was, the thing that Jermaine and I talk about is, what programs are out there that really do these things? What can we do to help these guys that are coming out, don't really know their path. They're trying to, they may have an idea of what they'd like to continue doing, but they don't know who they want to do it with. They don't know if they necessarily want to go work for someone. So we've actually applied through DoD Skill Bridge to become one of these companies that, as members are transitioning out of the military, they can apply for an internship or mentorship with us, and they'll spend some time learning what we know when it comes to entrepreneurship. Like Jermaine said, starting a business, how to get your business plan together, developing marketing strategies, pricing strategies, things of that nature. So we're trying to, further arm our brothers and sisters as they're getting out of the military and not really leaving them out of the cold, and introducing them to the programs that we know about.
Right.
So yeah,
that's great, and it's perfect segue. I was thinking, well, how can people really reach out to you and get connected, because you have such great services that can help, actually help anyone, but especially veterans if they're transitioning or if they find themselves, way too long at home, isolated from people. How can they reach out and connect with you?
Yeah. So PRJKT if you go there, that's PRJKT VET, and I'll give you the phonetics. That's Papa Romeo Juliet Kilo Tango.
Right there, right?
Right there.
Yeah.
For those that are listening and can't see, so at PRJKTVET.com, you can go in there, you can fill out a form to request any type of service that you see on the site, or if you just want to get in contact with us, reach out there. Our LinkedIn, and you should have access to our LinkedIn's after this podcast is posted. Yeah, I really encourage people to give me a call, just because I like to have these conversations, whether it be Zoom. I've reached out to a couple of Marines in the last couple of weeks, and we've just talked about their transition, some of the things that they've experienced. And that's really what I like to do. I like to understand what it is that you're dealing with and how we can help. So even if it's something that we don't necessarily do with ourselves, we're definitely here to connect you with the people that do. So
love that. And then, we're gonna make it really easy. We're gonna put links to your LinkedIn and your URL in the show notes. We're after one click here, really trying to help connect folks. Love what you're doing on a variety of levels. And it's really neat to, Kevin, as much as you and I collaborate, it's neat to kind of hear a wrinkle in all the stuff that you do, Kevin L. Jackson. It's neat to kind of hear, the world is so small. You start really peeling the layers back, and it's just really neat to see how small the world is. But hey,
yeah, I really believe in the mission and what Project VET is doing, and my daughter is even involved also in helping some of the gaming operations.
Absolutely.
And talk about network, Ruth Cohen. He's a longtime friend of mine. We work together in cloud computing in the government, and we maintain that network. And he's an entrepreneur, and he started Award Pool. So I got Project VET in touch with Award Pool, and boom.
Man. It's a beautiful thing, and huge things lie ahead, beyond all the great service work you're doing for the veteran community. So we look forward to supporting the cause in any way we can here at Veteran Voices. Love Jermaine and Rod, the time we spent here. Jermaine, anything else to add in terms of how to track you down? Are y'all both active on LinkedIn?
Yes. LinkedIn, definitely hit me up. You can also email me. It's the same thing. Just put a hyphen in between Project and VET.
Yep.
And Jermaine at ProjectVet.com. I'll respond.
And what we didn't touch on really quick to our listeners, and we're talking pre-show, some of the different ways that you can get involved and help support, from funding the organization, right? Like any early stage startup, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit, doesn't matter. You're after that funding oftentimes. So that's a big opportunity. I believe volunteers or employees, even Jermaine and Rod, I think that's another opportunity. There's a third opportunity, that I'm forgetting right now? What?
Well,
else?
I don't know if this is the third opportunity, but if you're a gamer, jump on and play games. I mean, go to Discord, it's a community, this happens, this works when you build community by interaction.
Absolutely. And that third little thing there was, if anyone works for EA Sports and they want to give us access to their back end of their API, like, it's for a good cause. It's for veterans mental health awareness.
We got it. Yeah. Let's see if we can't do that. We just interviewed someone that was formerly with EA Sports, and now she's in the freight tech sector. And y'all probably have a lot better connections than I do. I was talking about Madden football with her and some of the other games that I grew up. We all grew up with. So, but hey, folks, get involved. Love what Jermaine and Rod are doing. We've been talking with Jermaine Cohen, managing partner and co-founder at Project Vet, and his partner Rod Lee, partner and co-founder at Project Vet. Big thanks for your time here, Jermaine and Rod. Really appreciate what you're doing, and look forward to reconnecting with you again real soon. But don't go anywhere, because we're going to talk about you now like you're not here. So Kevin, I'm put you on the spot. Really appreciate you bringing this story to Veteran Voices and the Supply Chain Now family. Love what we're doing with you and Digital Transformers. But what's one thing that you heard Jermaine and Rod speak to here today that folks really need if they forget everything else? What's the one thing?
Reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. You have friends everywhere. You're not alone, right? You're not alone in the world, especially if you're in the military community. Look at this. We got, 4 people from different walks of life, different beginnings, different branches of the armed service. But look, we're all working together. We're all community. So reach out.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point to finish on there. So on behalf of our entire team here, hey, thanks for joining us for this episode. Big thanks to the Project Vet team. Big thanks to my special co-host, Mr. Kevin L. Jackson, who served in the second best aviation. No, I'm kidding. I'm a non-aviator. I can't pick on you.
Oh, God, don't make me do it. Don't make me do it.
But to our community and our listeners, hopefully you can see how much fun. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much as we have. Hey, find us wherever you get your podcast from. Subscribe for free. Hey, reach out, like Kevin just mentioned, and connect with Jermaine and Rod and the Project Vet team. There's a variety of ways to get plugged in and you help them help serve the veteran community. So really appreciate that. As always, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you're a veteran, you got a story to tell, reach out. We'll try to work into our production calendar. And as we sign off here, on behalf of Kevin L. Jackson and our team, entire team here at Veteran Voices, hey, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, give forward, be the change that's needed, be just like Jermaine and Rod here. And with that said, we see you next time here on Veteran Voices. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.